WOW Virtual Pakistan 2021.
This festival is for children, it's for men, for everybody.
Women of the World Festival in collaboration with the British Council.
There are 11 million girls that may leave school by the end of the COVID-19 crisis.
She's Nighat Dutt from Digital Rights Foundation.
खुद को एक रोल मॉडल बनाना है।
औरत का मतलब है पर्दा।
When I heard other women, stronger women, powerful women, women I look up to speaking.
So being in that unique position, we can actually see both sides of the story.
हम मर्द हैं या औरत, हम दुआ हैं या बद्दुआ.
Programs, discussions, performances.
इस ड्रामा से निकलने में कितना वक्त हमें लगता है.
उर्दू में एक वार है,
Capped with a star.
#WeAreWow.
तारीखी वाक़यात को और तजुर्बात को ख़वातीन के लेंस से देख सकते हैं.
मैं ये साज पिछले 50 साल से बजा रही हूँ.
So the girls of Eternal Tal.
कि हमारे डिजिटल हुकूक क्या हैं.
Media is a reflection of a society is an argument that's been used to death.
There are also thousands of people around the world who are with you, supporting your dream.
Books like I Am Malala.
किसी से न डरे, आप अपनी आवाज उठाएं.
आज हम अपना डिजिटल म्यूरल We Are WOW भी अनमास्क कर रहे हैं.
A pop-up featurette and it's called Sultana's Dream.
एक पर्दा नशी औरत होने के नाते मुझे बगैर पर्दे के घूमने की आदत नहीं है.
WOW छोटू जो बच्चों के लिए एक ऐप है. इसमें गेम्स हैं, साइंस के एक्सपेरिमेंट्स हैं,
including the parents. It's a great way to bond with your children.
ArtTel एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है. प्लीज डू चेक इट आउट.
जिस प्लेटफॉर्म से बात कर रही हूँ वो है मामा बेबी.
एक खत तुम्हारे नाम because we got a lovely response.
Be the woman you want to see at every step in the world.
So 3 and a 2 and a 1 and what do we have? Here you go.
Everyone, and welcome to the second virtual Women of the World Festival in Pakistan and the 5th WOW Festival in the country. I'm Kate Joyce and I'm the British Council's Director of Cultural Engagement in South Asia, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the festival today. I want to thank you for getting involved in such an important programme on behalf of all of our partners, the WOW Foundation in London, Olomopolo Media in Lahore and the Entrepreneurship and Community Development Institute in Karachi. The British Council's partnership with the WOW Foundation has grown significantly since we worked together on the first WOW Festival in Pakistan, Karachi 2016. WOW Karachi inspired us to work together on festivals not only across Pakistan, but also in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal and Turkey. Gender inequality is, of course, a global issue. And so this powerful network of festivals is enabling us to really bring in diverse perspectives from different countries to explore the aspirations, achievements and challenges faced by women and girls today. WOW Pakistan is always an exciting occasion and has a history of breaking new ground. The ambition of the festival is to create an inclusive and open space where challenging questions and topics can be explored. The theme for 2022 is a strong one. It is Rani, based on the historical South Asian figure of female authority and adoration that has existed within and despite the frameworks of gender inequality that we continue to face in our everyday realities. The festival will explore female empowerment, encouraging us to reflect on this word, Rani, in terms of both its history as well as what it might mean for us both today and in the future, and celebrating the influence of Ranis around us all today. We're pleased that this year's WOW Festival is once again a virtual one. Whilst we do all miss being together in person, the fact this is a digital festival means we've been able to invite people all over the world to join in with this conversation in Pakistan, and also connect to the wider WOW movement, which champions gender equality globally. Over the next 2 days, there will be 100 women and men from across Pakistan and the UK performing, presenting talks, hosting workshops, and showcasing fantastic art. The programme sessions have been designed to appeal to people across different age groups, backgrounds, and genders, and now, thanks to the digital format, across different countries and continents as well. All conversations, talks, and discussions will be interpreted in Urdu and also presented in sign language as part of our ongoing commitment to make the festival accessible and open to all. I'm looking forward to so much of this festival. The opening keynote from Senator Sherry Raman, who has been a long-standing supporter of the festival. The panels talking about the intersection of the women's movement and the fight against climate change. The conversations with Yasmin Lari and Fatima Bhutto that look at what all women can achieve in different spheres. And also, I'm looking forward to enjoying performances by incredible women performers like Mai Dai, Wajiha Naqvi, and Natasha Ijaz. A big thanks to Jude, Domino, the whole team at the WOW Foundation, and to my own British Council colleagues who have been working incredibly hard with our curators and technical teams. Finally, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has made WOW Pakistan 2022 possible. All of the artists, activists, organisations, and last but not least, to all of you for participating and helping us to continue this important dialogue. I hope you will enjoy the programme this year and join me in celebrating all of the Ranis in your life. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jude Kelly, and I founded the WOW Foundation, the WOW movement, all the WOW festivals quite a long time ago now, 2010. And WOW in Pakistan has been happening since 2016. And that's 6 years of incredible work, joyful, energetic, determined to speak about how girls and women can close the gender equality gap in all areas of our lives, in finance, in health, in education, in everything to do with sport, with art and culture. And that is what the WOW Festival does. It spreads before us the huge potential that girls and women have. And then we say to ourselves, okay, we've got this far. How much further could we go? And I, for one, won't be happy until I've seen gender equality come about. Maybe not in my lifetime, maybe not even in your lifetime, but we stand on the shoulders of people who've made equality more real for us, more possible, and we've got to carry on with that baton and carry it forward. It's actually really exciting thinking about how to make a better world, but it's complex, it's not simple. It means investing in bravery, in the courage to speak out about things that aren't right. And also it means building the stamina for change. So we've heard so much this year about gender-based violence, and we've heard so much about the impact that climate change has, particularly on girls and women and their livelihoods and their safety. We know through COVID that women have been so disproportionately affected, not just through domestic violence, but also financial insecurity. And of course, the medical issues of being frontline workers and being put into situations where we are much more endangered. We know that the tremendous stress that is placed on us about caring, not just for children, but extended family members. And we know the mental health toll that takes. But I want to stress the fact that girls and women have done extraordinary things throughout history, despite being told that we shouldn't, oughtn't to, it's not appropriate, it's not useful. We've done all those things despite that message. So never think of yourself as a victim. Always think of yourself as a warrior. You can be a happy warrior. You don't have to be an angry warrior. But nevertheless, you have to be thinking, along with friends, colleagues, allies of all kinds, we're going forward, not because we're victims, but because we are equal. And the stamina to make change comes from optimism that that equality can be achieved eventually. And when you look at the WOW Festival and all the different kinds of people who take part, whether they are comedians or singers or people who are in the army, people who are medical officers, all of them combined are urging the world forward. And that's really what the WOW Festivals are about. They're not symposiums, they're not conferences, they're opportunities for celebration. And in that celebration, the opportunity to honestly say what's still not being spoken about, what's still not there yet. Every time I've been to Pakistan for the WOW Festival, I've been struck by the voices for change, and in particular, the young voices. So every year there's a feminist for under 10s, the under 10s feminist corner, where young girls speak, already well versed in the problems of being in the playground, of being at home, different duties for them than for their brothers, different attitudes for girls than for boys. And they already have fire in their eyes where they're saying, that's not the world I'm going to make. I'm going to make it different for myself and for others. So I think that WOW Pakistan has always centered very much on young people. But at the same time, WOW Pakistan has also recognized that there is great wisdom, great knowledge, great authority that older women hold and can bring to the next generation. And so I'm always admiring how WOW Pakistan mixes this blend of senior voices, seasoned voices, intelligent, intellectual, thoughtful, profound, and then blends that with the energy and optimism and vivacity and disruptiveness of young people. I want to stress that WOW not only wants to say we are not victims, we are survivors, but more than that, we are warriors. I also want to say that WOW is completely inclusive. Why should my human rights be superior to somebody else's? Why should my rights to define myself as history has defined me be different from somebody else's new thoughts on the subject? We have to open the doors and let in the future. And the future has to be about universal equality. I do always think that WOW Festivals need to remain energetic and vibrant and also entrepreneurial. And by entrepreneurial, I don't just mean that they are kind of creatively thinking about business practice, although I know that there's an amazing number of sole traders and women running businesses, and in the marketplace you can see all of these kind of new ideas and thoughts. But also entrepreneurial means taking a problem and imagining it from a different angle, thinking about it in a different way, and then, if you like, selling it forward. So how do we find the language, the tools and the language to speak to people who aren't convinced about gender equality and make it possible for them to join us as allies? That's part of WOW too, giving us the confidence of different people's stories that we hadn't heard or weren't aware of, and saying, let me tell you a story to somebody who's not convinced. Let me tell you a story about what this young woman did. Let me tell you a story about how this person survived. Let me tell you a story about how this person's innovating. And this collection of stories that you'll get from the WOW Festivals, it arms us with the equipment, with the knowledge, and with the what about this as an idea, all of which we need when you're going before societies that are cautious, even hostile, but certainly wanting to carry on refusing the future. So WOW Festivals, they are about ramping up the energy. And that's got to be including your energy, your personal commitment to going away from a festival like this and saying, I heard things I didn't know, I've thought things I hadn't been aware of before, and I'm going to have the courage to speak about them and tell my friends, my auntie, my mum, my dad, my cousin, my brother, particularly the people who you know make it difficult to speak of gender equality. Those are the people that you have to have the courage to persuade, because we don't want to be speaking in a bubble, do we? We don't want to be in a situation where we're talking to an echo chamber. Yes, we want to strengthen each other's armory, and let's do that. But in addition, we want to hear new things and tell them to people who are prepared to hear afresh. All the time, the barriers are coming down against structural inequality, but it's a long job. And even more so, saying, as I am, a white woman, a white cisgendered woman from the North, from the global North, it is absolutely imperative that people unlearn power as well as claim power. It is a totally distorted world in terms of who has power and who doesn't have it, who is deemed worthy and who is deemed invisible. We have to change that. We all need to do our part in unlearning status, unlearning power, as well as grabbing it and using it for the good. So I hope you have a fantastic WOW Festival in Pakistan. It's a resilient country. It's an energetic country. It's a marvelous country. Like all other countries in the entire world, we haven't got gender equality there yet. But the inspiration that you can give to all the other WOWs, WOWs in Turkey, WOWs in America, WOWs in Australia, WOWs across the whole of South Asia, please do it. We're relying on you, and we know that you're going to come through. So take all the amazing subjects that are coming up during this period, have a fantastic festival. I'll be being inspired, watching it online. And then we'll bring WOW Pakistan back into full throttle across the world, and everybody will be the beneficiary. Have a great WOW, and thank you, Pakistan, for flying the flag for WOW equality. We're with you all the way.
It is a singular privilege for me to be speaking at the opening of the WOW Festival, which has become an important convening of women across the class, country, and other boundaries that stop us from sharing our stories, our strengths, and our sisterhood. For this, I thank the British Council, the WOW Foundation, curators, activists, and all participating organizations who bring their energy and resources together to make this event an annual highlight of International Women's Day for many of us. What many of us particularly appreciate and need at this point is a platform for giving voice and visibility to the many brave, unsung, and excluded actors that power on with bringing change and hope to a landscape of challenges. These are both structural and social. They hold women back, they seek to victimize women and shut down all resistance, reform, and real public change. Your theme for this year is a celebration of the Rani, not a woman who usurps or controls, but a leader who acts for others as well as herself, whether in the community, broader public platforms, or the family. It is in fact a great passion of mine to bring forth the voices and the work of the historically courageous but underappreciated women of Pakistan who have been Ranis in their own right, with work that advances the tough work of challenging the patriarchy. These are the women whom I have chosen to showcase, some through their own searingly brave stories and some through their work in my recently launched anthology on women navigating modernity, politics, and activism in Pakistan. It is called Womensplaining. With no apology to those who prefer a genteel discussion, here it is, and I'm shamelessly promoting it. This book sets about defining a fraction of what women in Pakistan went through a historical prism as well as current, and still face in many more forms and will need to speak out and fight about. Unlike the term mansplaining coined by Rebecca Solnit to describe how men often interrupt a woman's expertise to condescend or just simply to explain in ways that jar, womensplaining is not a signifier of either. It is a term that we appropriate for finding a voice, amplifying it, and using that voice to level up priorities tell stories, build bridges, take down the patriarchy, give ourselves the wings to take flight, and celebrate courage. These are the Ranis, all the authors that have toiled through generations of resistance and reform movements, some radical, some incremental in their strategies to shift the needle on change for women. On my mind more than others are my sisters in the Aurat March today. This is a unique movement in Pakistan and constantly challenged by those that fear women's voices. These women march for their rights on International Women's Day in different cities, villages of Pakistan in a colorful, multi-class coalition of women from all classes and walks of life. They want to be heard, just like the authors and the writers in women's planning. As women and men from all generations join every year to celebrate their womanhood on 8th March and to bond in solidarity for defining the rights to their lives and choices, many people in Pakistan still actually ask why women march. Amazing. But this is not the only question. A great number of people, including influencers, still ask why women even want the right to their bodies and, more broadly, life choices. One of the most insidious derailers, in fact, is invariably couched in class sanctimoniousness. Don't Pakistani women need basic social services first, they see? In doing so, they ignore the diversity of women in these movements or the fact that economically vulnerable women face a disproportionate impact of rights deprivations. Obviously, the Aurat March slogan has cut such an open nerve across a wide class swathe that it has led to many, including women, stepping back in diffidence. I have a very clear view on this. Allow me to womansplain not as someone talking down at men or even women, but as a woman who wants other women to be heard as much as herself. Here's why I think women need to talk even more about what they want and need. Many of us have spent our adult lives explaining why we want rights over our own bodies, choices, careers, income, childbirth, identities, and lives, because these are baseline asks. Worse still, we demand equality and even some power. In this bruising quest, my generation was lucky to be led by big, brave voices in what became a clear, identifiable women's movement in the mid-1980s, which linked its goals to the restoration of democracy. Therefore, they engaged in mainstream politics or political parties. Benazir Bhutto, a Shaheed, became the political face of the restoration for democracy, for instance, while Asma Jahangir and other heroes created Women's Action Forum. They created other groups and the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. These were all birthed with active input from the women's movement. In fact, went side by side, because for us, women's rights were human rights, and they continue to be today. Many legal and legislative battles were won, but only partially. Today, 35 or more years later, we and the younger women are still fighting the old battles that we fought while layering on new fights. I recount all this because there are many reasons why women march today, most of them structural, others political, while many are cultural. In Pakistan, just like anywhere in the world, the fight for women's rights is a battle over power. Of course, the power to exercise one's choices are limited by class and opportunity for men too. But for women, despite advances made, the limits on choices still make many old walls close in, while new predations lay their building blocks. Women march to knock these over. One of these new walls being built on the ramparts of misogyny is the discourse on women's bodies, which has historically preoccupied many minds, both public and private. Instead of worrying about why a woman dies in childbirth every 20 minutes in Pakistan, mostly because they are married off too young, many leading voices have expressed anxiety over why women want their right to their bodies and lives. This fear of women gaining control over their bodies, I'm afraid, is very real. It permeates all social classes, not just the bottom of the rural and social pyramid, but also urban elite enclaves, who should really know better. Paradoxically, such multiple Class resistance has already marked Aurat marches as successful in one sense. When movements build momentum, for instance, they create intellectual, social, and political debate amidst disruption, through which they also leave a mark. One mark is the discourse they create as well as the silence they break. The controversy over women's right to choose their life paths is a good point. It is out now in the light for its meaning to be stripped of false ideologies and moral gatekeeping. Another clear but intangible imprint over time is laid in precedents set, perceptions shifted, role models created. For instance, the broad appeal of Aurat marches has made it safe for many non-activist women all over the country in taking their moral solidarity to the street. For many of them, the person has not become the actively political, the personal has not become the actively political, but yet they are able to join in to show support. Another success of this second wave feminist momentum is that it has, for now, you can call it the second or the third or fourth wave, depending on where you saw the waves, but it's the second largest in my view, created boundaries against impunity for abuse on public platforms. Because of support energized, for instance, by women, even Aurat marches, media opinion shapers, celebrities, politicians, and TV anchors, and a coalition of those wanting change, such as those you are platforming today, have started pushing for women haters to be called out. It is not enough to shift the verdict, for instance, on Qandil Baloch, where privatized justice had its own insidious bargain with each other. Justice was denied, in my view. Similarly, while we all rejoiced over the verdict in the Noor Muqaddam case, since it really was a beacon of hope in the otherwise onslaught of news on gender-based violence committed on the bodies of women with seemingly full impunity, the keener eye would have also picked up another severe injustice. People were left acquitted despite piles of evidence pointing towards accessory to murder, whereas the household staff received 10 years in prison. Class injustice perhaps prevailed once again. Yet no fight in the battleground for women's rights in Pakistan is ever free of assaults, and revisions occur, as you can see, like sunset every day. Women's access to healthcare and literacy, for instance, is at only 45% for females. With the gender gap, pay stands at an abysmal 37%, and I think it's a lot more, but these are the statistics we're getting, which does not even consider work or as part of the long arc of the fight. These don't consider work that women do. The manifesto of change, therefore, is long and inclusive for women, and this year's theme centers around labor, I'm very glad to see, and encapsulates the many nuances labor rights and the legislative shortcomings that are specific to the experience of a Pakistani female worker. Now, of course, the political debate on my body, my right has sparked so much heat on public platforms from parliament to television that women at all levels are repeatedly still called out for seeking rights over their bodies as either absurd or wanton or both. They are marching, we are marching for all sorts of rights, including the right not to be honor killed or assaulted at home or harassed anywhere, not distance people from what women are marching for. As a woman's splainer, let me say there's a fairly mainstream argument to be made here. To seek such a right in Pakistan and space for others to seek more, one can appropriate the appeal to human rights, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's words, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah's words, or the Constitution of Pakistan and the kitchen sink as much as one can find justification in religion. Again, the questions we need to frame such a slogan in are fairly fundamental and really should not provoke hostility. According to the United Nations data, 48.1% of Pakistani women have no say in their health decisions. This really worries me. These may be failures of the state, of course they are to a great extent, but that is not the point. Who should have control over an adult woman's right to marry, give birth, have a say in her own health decisions? A man because he has power? I don't think so. This is Pakistan, where some of the best stories are its women, and this is the 21st century. Does our culture really want to condone acid crime when a woman spurns a suitor? Because these questions arise as a corollary. of denying rights to women over their bodies? Do women not have a right to plan their childbirths, or are we still supposed to be chattel? Do women not have a right to speak out against rape and sexual harassment? Why must women who march or speak out be accused in court petitions of an agenda that spreads anarchy, vulgarity, and hate? This is what happened last year. And we wonder what will happen again, and has been happening in front of us. Pakistan, for its part, in the public laws realm, has made laws against such practices. We've all worked very hard, including sisters from civil society, to see that such laws were made. In fact, half our energies were spent in doing so. So, laws against such practices, but detractors do realize when they obstruct the right to choose autonomy over women's bodies, do they realize, I mean, this is a question I'm asking, that they're tacitly espousing the right to violence against women? Do they? I don't know, because they act like they don't. Statistically, home is still, bizarrely, the most dangerous place for a woman in Pakistan. This is not a good fact, but there it is. That is where much of the violence originates, as well as most honor crimes. As for choice, does Islam not ask for witnesses at a woman's marriage to protect her right to choose and specify agreement? Let's invoke religion here. Does Islam not ask for witnesses, insist on witnesses at a woman's marriage to protect her right to choose and specify agreement, her consent, 3 times, not once, but 3 times, in case she's being coerced? So what is exactly wrong with marching for such rights? Frankly, nothing. This is all about power, not about rights. This is all about power moving beneath our feet, nothing more, nothing less. And though the detractors of women's rights, women's power, Aurat marchers, are all basically against giving women more power, even in the increment. So there we have it. Where do we stand now? Well, every incipient movement has a beginning, a plateau, and a reckoning with history. I hesitate to call it an end. This one is young, full of hope, and to be continued. Along the way, it must grow its base, create intergenerational links, invest in timeline strategy. It must build networks, and this is what my book also goes on about. It must build networks across international and institutional champions, which is what you are facilitating today through WOW, political parties and governments, in order to translate some of its demands into tangible, realizable goals. These will have to be addressed, created over time, and culturally buttressed. It will take tenacity, courage, and a few good women and men. Right now, we have thousands. So, as the wheels of anti-rights denialists turn their inevitable guns against the Aurat marchers, the women driving it must look to what it can learn from the past and who can be its buttresses. This is again what Womansplaining, the book, is about. One generation speaking to another and building its bridges to basically create a critical mass for the same goals, in order to grow into a clear, sustained movement with a strategy to translate demands into institutional and sustainable goals. All activities, activists and allies must build networks and intergenerational bridges. Yet, even today, we are often dismissed as a band of urban women radicalized by our privilege, not in spite of it. This has been the patriarchy's expedient whip to lash educated, progressive women who use their access to an education or the resources they have access to ask inconvenient questions. The thing most denialists like to forget is that these demands are not limited to urban elites. They resonate in the sisters, in the stories of sisters who work at home, in the minds of sisters who work at home and outside for little or no pay, at the bottom of the social pyramid. The fight is for our sisters more than ourselves. The good news is that with active support for women's voices growing, as well as choices at the mainstream level, millennial women and their older colleagues even post-millennial women and their older colleagues, are not being demonized without public condemnation. A good section of the public leadership at the political, media, and social levels has rallied around women's causes, which means that while questioning and witch hunts go on, the space for public misogyny has shrunk just a little. While it expands, it also shrinks. So it's like, 2 steps backward, 1 step forward. Or the other way around, 1 step backward, 2 steps forward, we hope. Again, like always, as any sister in solidarity will tell you, no gains for women are ever irreversible. To the contrary, in fact, just like I said, it has certainly gained wings online where abuse is unfiltered and often unchecked. So that's one of the predations younger women have to worry about. There was no online universe, let alone abuse. But here's a new layer of predation that now everyone is involved in looking at, and I hope regulating, not censoring. This should not become a reason to censor the media, which is one of the concerns we have today. But regulating is different from censorship. Let's be very clear. Again, for women at the bottom of the social pyramid, many of the walls are physical, tangible imprisonments. For other women who have found a voice, the very act of womansplaining anything to society, to anyone, is too big a threat. As Malala Yousafzai found out, a woman with a pen was too much of a risk to the status quo. Now, compounded by the embedded architecture of patriarchy, which cites culture and religion to sanitize its gender prejudice, women in the rural economy, as well as urban work dystopias, are rarely given the rights that accompany earned labor, which is what this year's theme is. While Oxfam, for instance, calculates the global worth of women's unpaid labor at $10.8 trillion, $10.8 trillion, people, for which they work for a total of 12.5 billion hours. Clearly, women make the world go round. No one has calculated nor recognized the unpaid labor of women all over Pakistan. Until now, a new ILO report says that in Pakistan, women spend 231 minutes per day. 231 minutes per day providing unpaid domestic services, whereas men only provide 17 minutes of domestic services. So my husband has to cook more, putting Pakistan as the 3rd highest country for gender parity for the gender gap in domestic work. How can anyone be surprised that women take to the streets when this is their ground reality? Why should anyone be offended if women ask men to cook or wash their own socks or iron their own shirts? Really. Largely, the rights that women ask for then directly contribute to Pakistan in ways, in what GDP for instance, that seem to fail to make headlines the way anti-women denialist or Aurat March rhetoric does. At the moment, 24% of educated people are jobless now, and I think the number is higher, but 40% of educated women are unemployed. Again, for this too, I think the number is higher, but those are the statistics at hand. This has severe consequences on our economy, as half the population is being left unpaid. The fruits of diversity are left to rot. The IMF, the big bad IMF that we rail against every day, has got this right, estimates that if women's participation in Pakistan's economy were equal to men, it could add as much as 30 to 60% to our GDP by 2025. What a big number we're ignoring. In its Pakistan at 100 report, the World Bank has stated that if Pakistan is to become an upper middle income country, by 2047, women's participation in the workforce will have to rise from the current 26 to 45%. In fact, all SDGs, poverty, zero hunger, reduced inequality, peace, justice, strong institutions, education, all will be impacted by the gender gap. And women are 10 times more involved in household chores, child and elderly care than men in Pakistan. So this leads to women being more time poor and having less time to spend in gaining skills and getting jobs and contributing to the development of our country, let alone their own lives. I mean, enriching their own lives is a separate conversation which I've been trying to put on the table for years. Women have also been bound to long-standing regressive cultural norms and laws which has halted their progress throughout the world, but especially so in Pakistan. And despite overall improvements in global trends such as poverty, literacy rates getting better for women, and access to healthcare getting better for women, often women and girls are the last to receive such basic necessities due to laws, or more than laws actually, culture prioritizing men and boys. What is extremely worrying is the evolution of women's rights, which is extremely lethargic, I would say, as the global landscape changes. COVID-19 and climate change are the most significant examples of short and long-term trends that will transform the planet's experience and all of our lives, threatening the well-being of a global population. From the data that is available to us now, the most vulnerable people in the world, no surprises, are at the forefront of the impact of both these calamities. Society and laws have not kept up with these megatrends as COVID-19 brought alongside it. And we discussed this last year as well, but I think it's important to keep bringing it up. The shadow pandemic of domestic abuse and gender-based violence. In 2020, there was a 200% increase in calls to domestic abuse helplines, whereas statistics of such shame was staggering. 430 cases of honor killings in Pakistan, and despite the issue of underreporting, 2,297 cases of violence against women were recorded. Again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Globally, 70% of health workers and first responders are women, and that is the case in Pakistan too. We uphold a huge care economy that goes unrecorded, and yet we see the gender pay gap when women are at the forefront of mitigating global crises just growing. COVID-19 has also increased the pressure on working mothers, low-wage workers, and other players and activists who are on the front lines, and there's no denying that it has contributed to the worsening of gender poverty gaps. Lastly, I want to say that according to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, 70% of the world's poor are women. And I think we need to keep hammering this point home, where climate change is pushing them further and further below the poverty line. It's a very real and current danger for Pakistan. Women are the most affected in the aftermath of disasters, particularly suffering enhanced exposure to sexual assault and violence. In fact, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature stated that women and children are 14 times more likely to die than men during disasters, and this holds true for conflict zones literally all over the world. But in Pakistan, it is even more, pointed. I can afford to ask most of these questions in Parliament because I am from Benazir Bhutto's party, where this is considered a responsibility, not just a public good that we personally espouse. And many people are now, parliamentarians are beginning to do this. I'm also secure in the knowledge that people from my party, the men in my party, as well as the party leadership will be united in going out on a limb to support women, to protect Aurat marches, which we do, let alone protect my feminism, which is often under assault, like many other women. But I'm an empowered woman with access to resources. I've reached Parliament and a pole position of power that many other women just aspire to from the middle classes that I came from. And I know that others will do so too. We will all stand up for each other as much as we can. But I do take this opportunity to say that sisters in solidarity must continue to seek the right to choose control over one's body, must continue to seek equality in pay and labor, and must look to get their work recognized as the world turns on our labor. Women's work, women's lives. Thank you very much for giving me the time, and I look forward to any meaningful exchange in the near future. I'm afraid I can't take questions, but Best of luck with the rest of the festival, and thank you once again for bringing so many of us together, even during difficult times. Thank you.